Right. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil kareem. Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Welcome everyone. My name is Mahsin Sharif from the Treasury Department of the Islamic Development Bank, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the sixth and final webinar of the pre-annual meeting series of events that the Islamic Development Bank has organized virtually this week, leading up to the 2023 ISDB annual meetings in Jeddah next week, inshallah. The range of events has been very dynamic this whole week, from management of the food security crisis to institutional investments in a volatile environment, the environmental protection to youth empowerment, and of course, at the Treasury Department, we discussed the Sukuk market outlook and prospects on Monday, and here we are today, where we will be taking a deeper dive into the local currency Sukuk issuances with the support of experiences of both Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well as Republic of Indonesia. To commence the proceedings, I would like to invite His Excellency Dr. Zamir Iqbal, the Vice President Finance and CFO of the Islamic Development Bank, to kickstart the proceedings with the keynote address. Dr. Zamir.
Thank you so much, Brother Mohsen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, distinguished guests, experts, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuhu. And a very good morning, afternoon, and evening to everyone joining us around the world in this very important webinar. It is my pleasure to be here with you to listen to the expert panelists who are bringing a wealth of knowledge on local currency Sukuk issuances from their respective jurisdictions. I think before, as Brother Mohsen said in the introduction, I think local currency Sukuk are a very important component of any capital market. And for that matter, MDBs have been involved with local currency issuances, local currency bonds issuances for a long time. And I think time is very good that I think IDB is also looking into that how we could add value to any country's economic development through local currency Sukuk issuance. And in that respect, it is very important that we discuss this topic. And with this background, we did end up getting two very good panelists. I'm very thankful to them for joining us. I think everyone, as you may be aware, that local currency issuance have for a long time been known to boost a capital market, domestic capital markets, and enhance local economies. If you look at the IFM Sukuk report for 2022, domestic Sukuk issuances have grown multifold from almost 80 billion back in 2017 to 140 billion in 2021. So if you look at from a business and the institution perspective, they serve as an alternative source, and in some cases, cheaper source of financing, bringing about great financial flexibility as well. For investors, they offer good opportunities for diversification and the protection against foreign exchange risk, inflation risk, and provide a larger universe for asset allocation. In a volatile market environment, especially in the developing countries or the emerging markets, local currency issuances help to maintain access to capital markets and thereby serve as a critical source for sustainable economic activity. Needless to say, local investors or domestic investors would prefer local currencies most of the time. This helps in building and maintaining a large investor base that is stable and resilient in the face of any sudden economic shocks, which can also be largely aligned with national aspiration. Both the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Indonesia, who are also G20 member states, are very active and have a very vibrant and leading markets for local currency Sukuk issuances. This has been proven time and again with their growing volumes and frequent issuances that are regularly oversubscribed by investors. This has enabled institutional investors, including Islamic financial institutions, to become part of the national economic growth stories. ISTB is proud to have both countries as their shareholders and promote their successful journey. I believe I recently saw a news item where one of the local currency scoop, which is a cash work scoop, was awarded the IDB's, um, I think, prestigious award for the outstanding innovative product. So that is one example of IDB recognizing any such efforts. Now, coming to the IDB, the ISDB's realigned strategy 2023 to 2025 has very focused on strengthening the Islamic capital markets as a key component for the cross-cutting areas of Islamic finance and providing technical assistance in this area as a key tool for us, in addition to the reverse linkages program for sharing knowledge and technical skills among OIC member countries. ISTB stands ready to help our member countries replicate the succession of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Indonesia and build more deeper and stronger domestic capital markets that contribute towards overall sustainable economic development. Here, I would like to mention the other countries who have much longer and deeper and pretty active capital markets in, for example, Malaysia, Turkey, and other countries who have done domestic sukuk, sukuk in the domestic currency. Again, I would like to thank the expert panelists for participating in this discussion today, and I look forward to learning from their vast experience and insights. I hope the audience take the maximum benefit from their experts' presence here. I thank you for your kind attention and convey my best wishes for a productive discussion, inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zamir, for outlining the benefits of local currency and how ISDB member countries can leverage on ISDB's support to further develop this segment, inshallah. We now move on swiftly to the panel discussion, where we are joined by senior experts from both KSA and Indonesia. It is our pleasure to welcome Mr. Muhammad Al-Muhaiziri, who is the head of markets development in the National Debt Management Center from Saudi Arabia. In his role, Mr. Muhammad overlooks the efforts to expand the funding channels by enhancing the existing as well as new instruments, and leads strategic initiatives under the Financial Sector Development Program. Welcome, Mr. Muhammad. And we also have Dr. Rifki Ismail from Indonesia, who is a Deputy Director in Bank Indonesia, the Central Bank of Indonesia. Dr. Rifki is a veteran central banker with 24 years of experience in various departments, such as Economic Research and Monetary Policy Department, the Islamic Banking Department, and the Financial Market Deepening Department. Most recently, he is attached with the Islamic Economics and Finance Department since 2017 in Bank Indonesia. Our moderator today for the expert panel is Brother Muhammad Sharaf, who is the treasurer of the Islamic Development Bank, overseeing the bank's overall treasury and capital market activities. Prior to joining ISDB, Brother Muhammad was the head of structured finance at Credit Agricole Bank, covering Egypt. Prior to that, Muhammad spent 12 years occupying several managerial roles with Arab African International Bank. Just before we begin, a quick note for our audience. Please do not hesitate to post your comments and questions by using the Q&A function in Zoom and the chat box for those who are watching the live YouTube streaming. With this, I hand over to you, Brother Sharaf, to take the panel forward.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Dr. Zamir, for the quick introduction and setting the tone on the local currency funding. Thank you, Brother Martin, for the introduction for our panelists, Dr. Rifki, Brother Muhammad. It's an immense pleasure to have you today. As Dr. Zamir have highlighted, we really want to benefit out of your experience on the local currency issuances of Sukuk. Let me start this by outlining, I think, Dr. Rifki, you have a kind of a brief presentation, which we all are keen to listen to and have some kind of insights. After that, we will have some Q&A on the presentation itself. Then Brother Muhammad al-Mafei will also give some, I would say, key points that we want to tackle out of his experience in Saudi Arabia. And then we will run through an interactive session where our audience will be able to post, their questions on the Q&A session. I want to make this as much interactive coming out from the audience as much as we can. So the floor is yours, Dr. Rifki. Let's start your presentation.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Your Excellency, Dr. Zamir Iqbal, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, and my fellow panelists, and the ISDB team, my colleagues. I have many colleagues in the ISDB. Alhamdulillah, it's my very good pleasure, my great pleasure to join this very fruitful event. Especially, it's an honor for Bank Indonesia to be involved and take part in this very prestigious session. And also thank you for the moderator, Brother Sarah, for introducing me. Let me share my slide. Can you look at my slide clearly now?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let me start my presentation. So actually, the topic of my presentation is very specific. Particularly, I'm going to introduce and give some sort of illustration on Bank Indonesia Sukuk, or we call it Sukbi. Actually, in Indonesia, we have two types of government Sukuk. The government of Indonesia Sukuk, which has been issued since 2008. We have diverse types of government Sukuk. We call it SBSN, Government of Indonesia Sukuk. Even we are one of the largest issuers of Sukuk in the world, including the one that is very prominent in the world. We call it Government of Indonesia US dollar denominated Sukuk. But this one I'm going to introduce about Central Bank, Bank Indonesia Sukuk. First of all, it's very unique to know what are the reasons or rationale to have Central Bank Sukuk, or this one, Bank Indonesia Sukuk, or we call it Sukbi again. First of all, there are some facts that we find in our Islamic money market and the Islamic monetary policy, of course. First of all, the Bank Indonesia Islamic monetary instrument, majority of them are non-tradable. We have issued many Islamic monetary instrument, but none of them is tradable. Before we issue this instrument, we call it Sukbi. Why? Because majority of these central bank Islamic monetary instrument are intended to manage liquidity, nothing to do with the real sector. That's the first point. Because what? Of course, all of us know it is not in the practice. Even it is illegal, if I can say that. It is illegal for the central bank to act as a commercial bank. Central bank is not commercial bank. Central bank cannot finance real project. Central bank is a central bank. Central bank is a regulator. They cannot do something related with the real financing in the real sector. There's a huge constraint for the central bank to issue what we call Sukuk or asset-backed Sukuk or asset-based Sukuk. It's very difficult, very challenging. And then a majority of the Sukuk owners in Indonesian market, they tend to hold the Sukuk until maturity. So it's very difficult to encourage them to trade Sukuk. And then we do have the Islamic reverse repo Sukuk, but it uses al-bai' and al-wa'ad contract. meaning the holder can just do transaction between them and the central bank. So there is no kind of incentive. They may not do some transaction within Islamic bank or between Islamic banks and conventional banks. And then the Islamic money market is the second option for Islamic banks after borrowing from their owners or parent company. Another one, there are also some pitch of fact in the Indonesian market. First of all, the current Islamic monetary operation, we need to achieve the rupiah stability, our currency stability. And then we do have Islamic and conventional monetary operation with the same target, meaning inflation targeting. And then we focus on certain liquidity absorption or expansion. But then, of course, from the perspective of Islamic bank or Islamic finance perspective, if Sukuk wants to be tradable, it needs to have underlying. And the underlying must be investment-based Sukuk in order to be a tradable one. Unless we have an investment-based Sukuk, the Sukuk cannot be tradable. Or we can employ, for example, Ijara Sukuk, and then the Sukuk can be tradable. But if we just use, like, for example, debt-based contract, of course, all of the scholars agree that debt-based contract cannot lead the Sukuk to be tradable unless it is in its, issuing price. You cannot have a margin or discount or anything from the market. But then our intention is to manage liquidity in the market. And then particularly, we want to integrate fiscal and monetary policy and instrument together. That's the first beauty of having this SUKB. We want to integrate fiscal and monetary policy, including instrument, all together. Secondly, we want to contribute. How can monetary policy contribute to the development of the real sector? There's a very critical question. And then third, but not the last, a dual function of monetary instrument and deepening the Islamic financial market. We want to have a central bank monetary instrument which will deepen the money market together. So it's not only issuing the central bank instrument, but there's no trading, no activities in the money market. They just hold it until maturity. That's not what we expect. So the issuance of SUKB is to fulfill this expectation. And then these are the rules and regulation. All of us know, the central bank cannot do commercial activities. And then for the case of Indonesia, central bank can only purchase government sukuk, but Central Bank of Indonesia cannot finance government project. And then another fact from the money market, the government sukuk is offered in the primary market, and Bank Indonesia can only purchase government sukuk in the secondary market. There is an option for Bank Indonesia to purchase from the primary market if there is an extra. I mean, the sukuk issued by the government is not fully absorbed by the market. If there is an excess issuance, and then central bank can purchase based on the permission by the government. So, but the full permission for Bank Indonesia is to purchase sukuk or government sukuk in the secondary market. And then, of course, the government of Indonesia, Sukuk, has underlying project, which is government project in the state budget. And then these are the like kind of framework of Indonesia monetary policy arrangement. We do have monetary approaches, conventional monetary management, and we do have Islamic monetary management or monetary operation. We do have conventional Islamic money market, we call it PUAS. We do have also a repo market and other segment. But on top of that, the target or the intention of Bank Indonesia is to achieve rupiah stability. And then these are only illustrating how is the performance of the Islamic money market in Indonesia. Alhamdulillah, it's quite active. We do have like 14 banks, both as the investors and as managers in Islamic money market. 3 of them are investors in Islamic one, and 6 of them are investors in, conventional one. Yeah. And then 11 are still becoming the investors, but not really active in trading the instruments. And then how is the performance of Sukuk? Sukbi, I mean. Sukbi is very attractive nowadays, alhamdulillah, since its issuance in 2018. The volume of the Islamic money market is between 500 billion into 3 trillion rupiah. In US dollar, maybe around 50 billion into 3 billion, 300 billion US dollar, the volume of Islamic money market. And then particularly the volume, the value of Islamic money market is only around 2% into 6% of the total money market. Still very tiny, but we hope that it will be growing very fast. And then how is Sukbi? Alhamdulillah, since its issuance is in 2018, it grows promisingly. We have had all tenors. I can proudly say we have all tenors of Sukbi, starting from 1 week into 3 weeks, 1 month until 12 months. So it is money market instrument. And then the issuances is ranging between 40 trillion rupiah until 70 trillion rupiah. Or we can simply say 4 billion US dollar into 7 billion US dollar. Yeah. So it is still very promising. And then in terms of the tenor itself, previously we don't have, what do I say? We is Bank Indonesia. We don't have 1 week, 2 weeks tenor, and then 3 months, 6 month tenor. But nowadays, alhamdulillah, with Sukbi, we can complete all of the yield curve. All of the tenors are occupied by Sukbi. And then what is Sukbi itself? Yeah. What is Sukbi? Sukbi is issued by Bank Indonesia based on the underlying of the government Sukuk. So if you are very familiar or you know IILM, the International Islamic Liquidity Management in Malaysia, the construction of their Sukuk is exactly or same as the one in Sukbi. We follow the construction, the approach of the ILM Sukuk with our Sukbi. But of course, the underlying of Sukbi is the government of Indonesia Sukuk. So it, of course, integrates fiscal and monetary policy and instrument together. Second, it deepens the Islamic money market because this Sukbi is tradable. I will explain it later why it is tradable. And then thirdly, it becomes Sharia compliant instrument. It also deepens the money market and it connects indirectly central bank with the real sector. As again, I mentioned, central bank cannot directly finance the real sector, but in this Sukbi case, we indirectly finance the real sector via government of Indonesia, Sukuk. So what are the expectations of Sukbi? Hopefully, it can become one of the Islamic benchmark rate in Indonesia. Of course, it has added the new instrument in the Indonesia money market and becomes the Sharia, another Sharia, Islamic money market instrument to strengthen the monetary policy together with the fiscal policy. It manages liquidity management. Even, alhamdulillah, this instrument has been the leading instrument in the Indonesia money market. A majority of banks, not only Islamic, but also conventional bank, they have Sukbi in the reserve and they will use it anytime for liquidity management. Of course, it supports indirectly the government project and it positions Bank Indonesia as one of the central bank in the world issues central bank Sukuk. So what are the features or what are the properties of Sukbi? It has a relation with the government. What are the relations? Of course, it uses the underlying, which is the government of Indonesia, Sukuk or SBSN. And then it integrates the fiscal and monetary policy together, even though Bank Indonesia is still an independent central bank. And then Sukbi itself, it is intended to deepen the Islamic money market. And then it is tradable and liquid in this Islamic financial market. And it is different from the previous Bank Indonesia Islamic monetary instrument. Because previously, as I mentioned, it is non-tradable. But this one, it is tradable. And then what are the properties involved in Sukbi? The obligor is Bank Indonesia. The investors are Islamic banks. Conventional can be the investor in the secondary market, but not in the primary market. And then you can just read in my slide. I believe my time is not very long. So this is the mechanism of Sukuk. As I mentioned, it follows the construction or the mechanism of the IILM Sukuk. So firstly, we do have Bank Indonesia has Government of Indonesia Sukuk, 100% owned by Bank Indonesia, but we share the ownership of this Bank Indonesia, Government of Indonesia Sukuk with banks, with Islamic banks. When we share this, we call it Musyarakah Sukuk. So the contract, the akad of this sukuk is Musyarakah Muntahiyah Bitamlik, Syirkah Al-Mulk. So it has had the fatwa from National Sharia Board. So we share the ownership of Bank Indonesia, ownership in Government of Indonesia Sukuk with banks. So we call it Sukuk Bank Indonesia. As simple as that. So how is the payment for the profit? The profit, of course, it comes from Government of Indonesia profit sharing in its government sukuk, but then we share some of them based on the share of the sukbi out of the total ownership of Bank Indonesia with the investors. So it is directly coming from the real sector represented by Government of Indonesia performance in the real sector. And then since it is occupying Musyarakah Sukuk, it is tradable. So, and then the tenor of Sukbi is lesser than the underlying. Of course, it is to fulfill the compliance, the Sharia compliance. And then the amount of Sukbi, of course, lesser than the value of the underlying Sukbi. And then, Alhamdulillah, like right now, we have had a varieties of Bank Indonesia Islamic monetary instrument. Previously, we do have Bank Indonesia Islamic certificate, but now we have Sukbi. We do also have repo, repo Sharia, also various kind of Islamic monetary instrument. And then these are the features of Sukbi. We have had fatwa from National Sharia Board. The tenors is from 1 day until 12 months. It is part of Bank Indonesia monetary policy. And then it is issued in rupiah currency as our topic, our event, local currency sukuk. The price is starting from 1 million rupiah, or 100, if you can say 10,000 rupiah as $1 US, we can simply say 100,000 US per unit, very cheap. So scriptless securities can be purchased only by Islamic bank in the primary market. Conventional can purchase in the secondary market. It is tradable, can be used as the short-term liquidity needs if they need liquidity from the central bank. Can be redeemed to Bank Indonesia, and the underlying is the Government of Indonesia Sukuk. Lately, we expand this Sukbi by having the inclusive Sukbi. So what is the inclusive Sukbi? Rather than having the Government of Indonesia Sukuk as the underlying, we have pool of other Sukuk. We have a green Sukuk, we have international Sukuk, we have various kind of Sukuk in the pooling of the underlying of Sukbi. So we use this pooling of Sukuk as the underlying of Sukbi. So we call it inclusive Sukbi. Of course, and again, the profit sharing is coming from this pool. When the pool generates income for the investor, including Bank Indonesia as the investors, of course, owners of this pooling of Sukuk, we share our received from this pooling of SBSL or Government of Indonesia Sukuk and other Sukuk to the investors of Sukuk. And then lately, or finally, this is the final slide, the intention of Bank Indonesia, Government of Indonesia, OJK, and various regulators, economic regulator in Indonesia, is to have some sort of coordination, synergy to strengthen economic resilience and revival. As you can see here, fiscal and monetary policy coordination, we accelerate financial sector transformation and real sector transformation. We digitalize the economy and finance, and we do also have a green economy and finance program. The goal is to maintain the resilience of the economy and stability, domestic and international, and we, of course, hope for the recover from of course, pandemic and post-pandemic condition. And we expect for the revival in the medium term. Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. I think you're muted, Brother Saraf.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rifki. And I really want to commend you for giving this detailed in a presentation in a very tight time. But I have a follow-up questions coming out, from some of the audience. But as well, I have my own set of questions. But let's start by something very interesting. We've got Bank of, let me see on the chat. So we get from Bank of Mauritania Central Bank. They're asking us whether we can share, the presentation or the detailed presentation toward them after this. And I think this is something that we think is very important out of this panel, is the reverse linkage, how we're able to transfer the experience from, one central bank to another central bank. Let me go back to the Sukuk B or Suk B, which is, a kind of a hybrid to align the physical maybe requirements, with the monetary, requirements. I have two questions coming out. One of them comes at how this would complement, the overall foreign currency funding program. So you're issuing local plus, foreign currency, how this is being aligned. This number one. Second question is coming, who is the buyers of those sukuk other than, the Islamic banks? Do you have foreign investors investing in Sukuk? And I think those questions can set the tone for more, understanding about the, who would be interested to buy the Sukuk, and whether it's a competition to the government, because you have the underlying coming out from, from I say Ministry of Finance, Sukuk. So how is this, ecosystem are being organized?
Thank you so much for the very important question. There is no competition, of course, between government of Indonesia and central banks. Even we collaborate, because as I mentioned, the government of Indonesia sells or offers its government of Indonesia Sukuk to Bank Indonesia. And then referring to your first question, how it relates with the international currency, for example. Currently, it is only government of Indonesia Sukuk issued in the global market. We call it SNI, National or Indonesian National Sukuk. It is US dollar denominated Sukuk. What I heard from my colleagues in Dubai when I visited them, I think 2019, I visited some of the asset management companies there. I asked them, which one or which Sukuk that you preferred most? Interestingly, they told me, your Sukuk. My Sukuk? Yes, your government Sukuk. Why? Because you are the only one government Sukuk, US dollar denominated Sukuk in the world. It is rarely found in the global market. I'm not sure if there is another improvement or innovation in the government Sukuk market nowadays. But in that time, they said, you are the only government US dollar denominated Sukuk issued in the global market. So we preferred your Sukuk a lot. So again, but Central Bank of Indonesia, we do not issue US dollar Sukuk. What do we issue with the Sukbi is the rupiah, local currency. But how it relates with the international currency? Again, by having inclusive underlying, currently we do not only have rupiah Sukuk as the underlying, but we also have international US dollar denominated Sukuk as the underlying of Sukbi. We combine them together. And then for the second question, who are the investor? Can the international investor invest in Sukbi? They can, but they need to contact the Islamic banks in Indonesia and ask them to purchase Sukbi for the international investors' investment. But they cannot directly contact Bank Indonesia as the investor to invest money. It needs to be via local banks, which is Islamic banks in the primary market, and in the secondary market, conventional banks. Why do we put conventional bank in the secondary market? It is To be honest, why do I mean, I'm not saying that I'm an expert, but I'm the constructor, I'm the drafter of Sukuk. That's why I know precisely how was it being constructed. When I drafted this idea, and finally it became, alhamdulillah, Bank Indonesia, a leading Islamic monetary instrument. When we come up with the idea, can we allow conventional banks to invest in Sukuk in the primary market? We come up with the idea that the share of Islamic banks in Indonesia is only around 7%, less than 10%. If we leave conventional bank to be the investor in the primary market, for sure, they will absorb all of Sukuk and nothing left behind for Islamic banks. While we prefer this for Islamic banks, first of all, then conventional later on.
Thank you, Dr. Rifki. Thank you so much. And I think you've brought the angle of the monetary, angle into the local currency Sukuk issuance. Let's move, to Brother Muhammad, who would bring us, into the more connection to the real sector, I would say. Still there is a monetary angle to it, and as we agreed, probably we'll give the key takeaways, on how National Debt Center, Management Center is aligning its local currency funding. Probably after that, we'll have the chat box getting a couple of questions, and then we go into the Q&A session. Brother Muhammad, please.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi.
Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, based on your time zone. In my session today, inshallah, I will be covering three main pillars. The first one is the key milestones that have been achieved over the past few years, the main lesson learned from our experience, and our focuses in the future. So if we go back to 2015 and we look to our debt portfolio, it was 100% based on international issuances. And if we compare it with our debt portfolio by end of 2022, the international issuances represent 38%, where 62% are from the domestic market. This shows the level of tremendous efforts and commitment that have been put in place in coordination with all government entities like the Ministry of Finance, the Saudi Central Bank, SAMA, the Capital Market Authority, the CMA, and even the other service provider in the local market, which resulted in transformation, not only on the infrastructure, but also in policy, regulation, and legislation. So I'll be mentioning the key milestones. For example, in 2017, we started the local Sukuk program in the local currency, and we issued the first 5, 7, and 10 years. In 2018, we listed these Sukuk into the local exchange to allow tradability, and also established the primary dealer program with 5 local banks, and also automating the monthly auction through Bloomberg rather than being on a manual process. In 2019, the denomination have been reduced from 1 million to 1,000 to accommodate different investors, and also further extension to the yield curve, including 12, 15, and 30 years. In 2020, the first liability management transaction, where the focus is to unify the outstanding issuances to be under the same program that was created in 2017, and also the listing of 2 government Sukuk ETFs in the market. In 2021, the linkages with IDA, the local depository, with the Clearstream, and also the inclusion of our Sukuk in index. In 2022, the linkages with IDA and the other service provider were clear, and last but not least is the onboarding of 5 international financial institutions to our primary program. And we are not done yet. There is a lot of initiatives and enhancements that are expected to be delivered this year or in the coming years. And personally, I think the key lesson learned is that you need to keep an open discussion and dialogue with the relevant government entities. And not only that, but also to have two ways of communication between international and local investors and financial institutions. As they are in the ground, they are conducting the day-to-day activities and transactions. And they would feel if there is any challenges that they are facing right now. And our role is to analyze and assess these challenges. And we try to overcome these challenges by providing the suitable solutions. And we need to make sure that the solutions are efficient and effective, and also aligned with international best practices. And going forward, we are focusing on diversifying the investor base in the local market, supporting the other local issuers to issue in the local market, and also increasing the liquidity in the secondary market, and to deepen our local Sukuk market. That's it from my side, and thank you all for your time.
No, thank you, Brother Muhammad. But, actually trying to get us through the journey of the National Debt Management Center, which I think is very important tool now in Saudi Arabia. Let me come back with a couple of questions. Some of them is coming to us, and some of them really mine. Mostly, I think, what is the structure? What's the underlying structure, of the Sukuk that is issued by the National Debt Management Center? I think this is one of the questions. The question that is coming also to my mind: do you have local and foreign investors investing on those Sukuk, or it's mainly local investors? And as Dr. Rifki have been saying, with a competitive advantage to Islamic Bank probably in Indonesia, and maybe any other investors or maybe international investors need to come through the secondary market. The last question that comes in my mind, is it on primary dealers or syndicated? So because probably like when we talked about Dr. Rifki was talking about the ILM, it comes to me, ILM always issues through the primary dealers most of the time. So how this is different than the Indonesian Sukuk?
Sure, and thank you for the question. So our local market is being conducted on the monthly auction. It would be through our primary dealers. We used to have only 5 local banks, and last year we successfully onboarded 5 international institutions. The focus is to attract more investors, whether locally or internationally. Even before joining the international primary dealers, we have international investors in the local market, but the focus is to expand and to allow the accessibility and ease of access to those international investors by the linkages with Euroclear, Clearstream, and having international financial institution to support or to facilitate the subscription from international investors. The first question was related to the structure of our Sukuk. The Sukuk is mixed between Murabaha and Mudaraba.
Okay, so mostly Murabaha and Mudaraba structures, this is being done through primary dealers, mostly, and now the number of is increasing of, let's say, primary dealers. And you have a mix of local and international investors, coming into play into your Sukuk. Maybe just to go directly to the, let's say, the interactive Q&A across, So thank you so much for giving us this kind of, I would say, structured guidance, through giving us your stories, coming out from our member countries, Saudi Arabia and Indonesia. I'm getting a lot of questions here, and one of them, and maybe Dr. Rifki, you can, how this is being aligned, how can this be for the policymaker to align Sukuk, as a part of the overall government, I would say the nationwide government funding strategy? Because when you talked about Sukuk B, or Suk B, you were talking about that the underlying is government, probably projects. There is a kind of coordination, among policymakers that this is, will be complementing a bigger funding program for the country itself, or maybe, an MPM program?
Okay, thank you so much. A very interesting question. Of course, government of Indonesia, they have set of government projects to be financed yearly, and of course, multi-years. They have annual government government projects to be financed. And then they fulfill this demand for financing by issuing government of Indonesia securities. They have two types of securities: conventional, which is bonds, and then Sukuk. By having Sukuk as this another alternative, or not to say, they are in parallel. They are in the same boat. Bond and Sukuk, they are in the same boat in Indonesia. And then when government of Indonesia offers Sukuk, they offers to industry, banks, and if there are still left, I mean, not all of the Sukuk issued in the market are absorbed by the industry, Bank Indonesia will be offered. That's in the first market or primary market. But in the secondary market, if there are Sukuk sold by the market, by the banks, Bank Indonesia can directly purchase in the secondary market. So how is the coordination? Or as you said, how can we say that there is a coordination, harmony, or anything between government strategy and funding for the government project? Of course, when the government needs liquidity, need financing to finance the government project, they issue Sukuk. Bank Indonesia is one of the investors in the primary market or in the secondary market. Even in the later stage, when Bank Indonesia shares its ownership in the government of Indonesia Sukuk with the banks, meaning issuing Suk B. It's not only central bank, but also banks get involved in the government of Indonesia financing project. But of course, through Suk B. Yeah, so there are three parties now. I mean, government, central bank, and banks. So banks can purchase directly in the primary market, or they can also purchase share of Bank Indonesia ownership, government of Indonesia Sukuk, via purchasing Suk B.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rifki. And I think this has proved the point that the question is coming from. There is a high level of coordination because it all benefits into the policymaker, the ultimate policymaker, which is funding, the real economy of Indonesia. Maybe I'll take the same question to Brother Muhammad, how this is being, I would say, coordinated, between issuance of Sukuk along with the funding, the total funding requirements of the country itself. I mean, is there a mechanics where you say, oh, I'll issue Sukuk here, but then, I'm issuing some other instruments? How is this being designed or, or aligned?
Yeah, before the beginning of the year, there is a multiple of discussions that happen in the center of the government and with Ministry of Finance to identify the government or the funding need for the next year. And as NDMC, we take this number And then internally, we prepare the annual borrowing plan, which we issue yearly, first quarter or the first two months, and to show our plan for the year ahead. For the local market, we will have the calendar for our monthly auction, specifying when the auction will start, when it will end, and when is the settlement date. And this goes to the 12 months of the year. And for international issuances, it depends on the market condition. We keep monitoring the market on a periodic basis, and if there is any opportunity that we will take it, of course.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad. So probably this is again, it's central, and then it's about the instruments and how to allocate and which currency, and then the tenors itself. I have a question also coming out, which is how a question comes: is this all of those sukuks are being accepted by banks as in terms of repurchase facilities? And if this have been tested before, let's go to Dr. Rifki. So this can be reput. So eventually, if let's say an institution investor is coming into those kind of sukuk, is this accepted by the central bank as into a repo facility?
Practically, in Indonesian market or sukuk market, we do have repo regulation. We call it Islamic repo. So for banks, either Islamic or conventional banks having sukuk, government sukuk, particularly, they can do a repo transaction, but it has to be Islamic repo, even though the players are conventional. That is our regulation. Conventional banks having sukuk and want to do repo, you need to do Islamic repo. You cannot do conventional repo because you are doing with Islamic securities, which is sukuk. And then, can they do repo with central bank? Of course, they can repo this sukuk, including Sukbi to Bank Indonesia. I can say that this Sukbi has at least 4 benefits or 4 beauties. First of all, it integrates fiscal and monetary policy together because there is a communication, harmony, coordination between Central Bank of Indonesia and Government of Indonesia. Secondly, it is tradable instrument, meaning it supports the deepening program in the Indonesia Islamic money market because, as I mentioned, previously there was even none of the tradable Islamic monetary instrument in the market. So the market players are very happy with this instrument. All of them collect this Sukbi in their reserve. And then thirdly, it is a macroprudential instrument. Why? Because Sukbi can be part of the collateral if any bank want to have Islamic emergency liquidity facility from the central bank. They need to pledge some collateral, and Sukbi can be one of the collaterals to have this Islamic emergency liquidity facility. And then fourthly, fourth but not the last, of course, it has a real sector underlying. That's the most important one. As I mentioned, central bank cannot have real sector base or real sector project in their securities. But now, under Sukbi, we can have real sector project in the underlying, which is the government project in the real sector.
Maybe just a question from myself and my team. Sure. They're asking if a foreign investor, does he have an access, to the Islamic repo facility? A foreign investor.
Have foreign investors. If it is individual, of course not. It has to be bank to do repo. Bank can
and even repo. If it's a foreign bank outside of
foreign bank can do repo. Yes, foreign banks can do repo. But if it is using Sukuk, they need to do it under Islamic repo mechanism.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rifki. Same question, I'll shoot it to Brother Muhammad. I know that this might be the case, but just wanted to know if you feel that this are being used as a especially the local currency issued from NDMC, is being used on a repo facility, because this provides a lot of liquidity on the market and people get into, other than the tradability for sure. So what's your experience on that, Brother Muhammad?
Yeah, definitely. So the Sukuk is reputable, and also, as I mentioned, part of the enhancement that are happening in the market. One of the companies or the service provider in the local market is the Tadawul Group, have launched the Maqasa, which is the clearing service and provide the repo service between two counterparties in the market. It's just being launched, and we are expecting to see more transactions in the future. 9 transactions, if I recall, 9 transactions have been conducted on that new platform. And in the future, inshallah, we will gonna see a lot of transaction happening on that platform.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad. So probably this also adds to the feature. Getting 2 questions, the traction is increasing, and one of them, what's the margin between for Sukuk? What's the margin between the price on the primary versus the secondary? So how do you see this? Is there a kind of tightening on spreads, and because of the demand for it, or it's just being used by the Islamic banks, and you see the trading, it's tradable but not with high volume? I think this is very important question.
Yeah. You're asking a very interesting question. To be honest, the fact in Indonesia Islamic money market is they tend to hold Sukuk and the government Sukuk until the maturity. Why don't they trade in the market? Most of them are offer liquidity. They have excess liquidity. They are having ample liquidity. They don't need extra liquidity. They are not in the sudden liquidity pressure. Secondly, if any of them wants to trade, it will directly absorbed by others. Then it is very rare. We find banks in Islamic money market wants to trade Sukuk. Currently, what I observe from my colleagues in the industry, all of them have Sukuk, but when I ask them, would you like to trade it in the money market? Firstly, they said, this is a very prestigious instrument. We don't want to sell it. Secondly, it is short-term instrument. Thirdly, we are not in the liquidity pressure. Why do we want to sell it? We don't need sudden liquidity. We are in ample liquidity. But I'm not sure if there is sudden liquidity pressure, because right now we are not only having 1 week, 2 weeks tenor of Sukuk, but we also have 12 months Sukuk. It is very possible for them having liquidity pressure to sell either one of the tenors in the money market. But currently, they love to hold it until maturity, because just being recently issued and being the favorite Sukuk in the market.
Thank you, Dr. Refki. Same question to Brother Muhammad. How do you see the spreads between the primary and the secondary on this Sukuk?
Yeah, to be honest, I agree completely with Dr. Rafiki. Yeah, so the government Sukuk or the sovereign Sukuk represent the high quality liquid asset. And most of the investors are preferring to hold it until maturity. And this is why we focusing on increasing the investor base to have more players in the market. So people will hold it until maturity, and some people will trade based on the market condition and based on their appetite and future investment.
Okay, I think this proves the point that we're trying to always say, that more trading, but eventually, as you said, because maybe it's a high, it's qualified as HQLA, makes it a lot of, people does not want to trade it. Maybe just, to ramp up this, I think one of the key points of this panel is to give a general outlook of the program for you, and what are being done, and what's the strategy going forward. And this is actually, as I said, is being seen by a lot of our colleagues in other central banks. So what's next? And I think this is a very important question. Both of those your countries have already transitioned through this kind of programs. But what's next? What's needed to be done more in this area? Dr. Rifki?
Okay, thank you. Of course, we need to issue more Sukuk in the market. And then we also need to have more engagement from not only Islamic banks, but conventional banks, even though they will engage in the secondary market. And then secondly, we need to have more coordination with the government because they are the provider of the underlying Sukuk, of course. If they issue more or they want to finance more projects in the real sector, they will issue more government Sukuk and it will become an increase of the underlying of Sukuk. And then what we want to do more, of course, if it is possible, but it depends on the market condition, demand from the players. If it is possible to issue US dollar denominated Sukuk. But of course, a lot of questions at least come in my mind. Yeah. Do they have enough stock of US dollar? If we issue US dollar Sukuk and then they don't have reserve in US dollar, yeah. Because mostly the Islamic banks in Indonesia, they are financing rupiah. They are not financing project with US dollar because it is a regulation in Indonesia to use domestic currency for any financing project. Yeah. And then the second one, and then of course the next intention would be we need to have more interaction, more trading activities by using Sukuk in the market. Hopefully, when they are engaging more, when they are having a lot of Sukuk in their stock, in their reserve, they may be interesting to trade this in the market and create benchmark rate later on, including the spread between primary market and secondary market, as you asked before.
Thank you, Dr. Rifki. The same for for Dr. Muhammad. As a concluding remarks, what is next? For the National Debt Management Center in terms of Sukuk, local currency Sukuk in specific, and in general, how do you see this is going?
Yeah, I think previously our role was to focus on securing the government need, and which, alhamdulillah, we successfully overachieving this objective. And starting, I would say, from late 21 and onwards, the focus is to develop the local market, which we already started by onboarding 5 international banks, by collaborating with other financial government entities in the local market, whether the Capital Market Authority or service providers, to enable and implement some of the changes and the market participant. We would like to see more issuers in the local market, issuing different securities, attracting more investors, and also for sure increasing the liquidity of the secondary market. And there is a lot of initiatives that are going to be introduced this year or in the coming years. Inshallah, we're going to see it. And also, we always contemplate and ask the market participant if you think this initiative or enhancement is effective and efficient, and if there is an appetite and the market conditions support this enhancement. Of course, we will do whatever it takes to do it in coordination with all relevant stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad. And I think this is gives a lot of encouragement. That more is underway, and I think this is really something that we would like our other member countries to have a look at it, and to understand that this is journey is not easy, but it's doable. Really, I want to first of all I want to thank you, all of you, for giving the time. Again, as I always say, I know that most of you have a lot of engagements every day. Giving us this at least 1 hour or 90 minutes is not something easy. So thank you so much. The second, we look forward to meeting you on our annual meeting. We have a very interesting, I would say, side event, which will also talk about sustainable finance in general, investment, but also Sukuk is a very important and very important component part of it. We'll be talking about it from ESG to green to even how we can construct, sukuk that helps into macroeconomic indicators. So all of that will be part of the our annual meeting, inshallah, and we welcome you and we want to see you there. The last thing I would say, let's have a group photo. This is a practice that we always do, so that we keep this memory of this important panel. So back to Mohsen. Mohsen, if you want to arrange for that.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad. This brings us to the end of the pre-annual meeting webinars of ISDB. As Brother Sharaf mentioned, our heartfelt thanks to everyone who participated, especially the expert panelists for their time and insights. I would like to reiterate the invite to all of you to attend the first in-person side event of ISDB at the annual meetings next week in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. The side event will be on the broader topic, as Brother Sharaf mentioned, of sustainable finance, partnership with investors for a better future. We look forward to welcoming you all in Jeddah, inshallah. Now, if I may request everyone, all the panelists, to smile for the group photo, and then we can inshallah.
Definitely. Respected panelists, on the count of 3, we'll take a group photo. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Mr. Sharaf. Mr.
Thank you, Dr.
Al-Muhaizi.
Rifki. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
so
Mr.
much. Thank you,
Musayyib.
Brother Muhammad.
Thank you,
Assalamu
Pak Zaki. Thank you, all ISDB team. Thank you all participants as well. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.